You guys can, go ahead and grab a seat. Grab a seat. I'm excited to talk this morning about a guy that many of us have heard about. Many of us know some of his story. Many of us, if you grew up around church, you've heard of a guy named Moses. Even if you didn't grow up around church, you probably still heard of a guy named Moses. He's not as famous as like King David. He's not as famous as Jesus, right? But he's pretty popular. He was the one that led the Israelites out of Egypt. So they were enslaved. They were in bondage 430 years. All of his people are in slavery. They're building the pyramids. And he prays and the people cry out. And Moses gets away. Like he's not really around the people. He's by himself. He's in the wilderness alone. And then all of a sudden, like this real weird situation happens. One of these things that like you look at and you go, that's either like God moving, it's a miracle, or Moses was high. Like there's got to be like some explanation of what's going on, because what he sees is a burning bush that's on fire but not being consumed. And so like everything I've ever set on fire tends to be consumed. That's just a nature of what fire does to things. But for whatever reason, this bush isn't being consumed. And Moses thinks, I need to get closer. I want to inspect it. I want to know a little bit more about it. And so he goes and he goes up to the bush. And as he's going towards the bush, somehow God speaks to him like from that area and tells him to take off his shoes. And he does. He says, the place you're standing is holy ground. And he says, Moses, I want you to lead my people out of Israel. I've heard their prayers. I've heard their cries. I want you to take them out of bondage and out of slavery, and you're going to lead them into a land I am giving you, a land full of milk and honey, a land that is wonderful, a land that is just full of blessing. You're going to love it. And Moses says, can you send somebody else? And it's like this weird conversation because God's like, Moses, I'm calling you. Like there's nobody else out here in the wilderness right now. Like I was out here to speak to you and you're listening to me and we're having a conversation. Moses, have you forgotten you're in the middle of a conversation with a burning bush? Like I am able to do whatever you need, but I'm asking you to go. And Moses says, well, God, here's the issue. I'm not a good speaker. I stutter. And you're asking me to go talk to the king, and you're asking me to go have these big conversations, and I'm going to get nervous. And when I get nervous, I stutter more. And I can tell you right now that when I'm standing in front of Pharaoh, and I'm trying to have this conversation, and I'm trying to say to him, hey, you need to let my people go. All these people that you have as like free labor that you've had for like hundreds of years, like I need you to free all of them. And we're just going to go into our own land. I'm going to mess that up. And God goes, Moses, put your hand in your jacket and pull it back out. And he puts his hand in his coat and he pulls it back out, and it looks like it's like there's a skin disease that's covering his hand. He says, now I want you to take your hand, put it back in there and bring it back out, and it's healed. And he's like, Moses, I'm able to fix your issues. And Moses goes through, well, God, I really don't want to do this. Can you just come up with somebody else? And he complains again about the stuttering. And then God, in a lovely conversation in the beginning of Exodus, God says this, who made your mouth? Who enabled you to speak at all? I will take care of it. And Moses finally just gives up and goes, God, fine, I don't have an excuse. I just don't want to do it. And I'm paraphrasing, you're getting Ryan's translation of what's happening in the beginning of the book of Exodus. But essentially what he says is, I just don't want to go. He finally just says, okay, I don't have an excuse. Can you just send somebody else? And God goes, I'm sending Aaron to you already. He's already on his way to you to be there with you, so you're not leading alone, because I don't want you being alone. But Moses, I wish you were just faithful and that you would have just committed to this, but you didn't. But either way, God uses Moses, and Moses and Aaron now go, and they have conversations with Pharaoh, and they say, you need to let my people go. And Pharaoh says, no. And bad joke, right? But Pharaoh doesn't let him go right away. And then what happens is the Egyptians have all these gods, and you may not know this part, but the Egyptians have all these gods, and they have like a god of frogs and a god of flies and a god of different things and a god of the water. And what happens is that God begins to attack those gods. He begins to basically compete with those gods and show that his dominance is there. And so each one of those plagues is over a god that is ruling and kind of would say that the Egyptians would recognize as reigning over us. And that's really significant for a couple of reasons. And one of the reasons that it's significant is because God is attacking the gods of their culture, saying that the gods of your culture are not good enough to actually compete with the one true God. The other thing that he's doing is he's showing an attribute of God that had never been shown in God before. And that's mobility. Because the way that God's worked in that time is that you would set up an idol, you would create something. You actually see at one point, after they get out of Egypt, that the people say, give us a God that we can worship for leading us out of Egypt. And they watch Aaron, Moses' right-hand guy, they watch Aaron take all this gold that they collected from the Egyptians, put it in a fire, make it into a calf, and then they begin to worship it. And here's what Aaron says to them as they begin to worship. He says, this is the God that led you out of Egypt. And if I'm there, I'm like, no, it's not. It didn't even exist. You literally just burned some earrings and shaped them. And you're telling me that it just like somehow predated its own existence and has gone back in time to like lead us out of a place that we just were. Like it's weird because we don't get their culture. But in their culture, they'd only ever worship the God that they could see. That there was a physical form of something made, and they would worship that, and they would lift it up. And so when they say, look, we don't understand how to worship an invisible God, we need something physical that we can worship, he creates something for them, but that's not what God wanted. And one of the things that God shows when he's in Egypt is that he has mobility. He's not a set stage. He's not a thing that has to sit on a platform. He's not something that has to be looked at in order to be worshiped or to be active. He's a God who is able to be mobile. So it's not just that he's competing against their gods. He's showing that he's far above them, that he's far better than them simply because he's on their turf. It's like, I'm going to win this on your turf, and I'm going to prove my dominance. I'm going to prove my lordship, essentially. And so he does that. And Moses is the one who gets blamed for it by Pharaoh, but credit for it from the Israelites. And he leads 2 to 3 million people out of slavery. And his intention is to lead them to the promised land. They get out in the middle of the wilderness and they start complaining. And it gets like real dramatic and it gets real crazy. And my favorite line from the whole thing is they cry out, we should have just died in Egypt than to be out here in this wilderness. And Moses goes, how foolish are you? And God gets mad, and God says, well, now you guys aren't going to see the promised land that I have for you, so I'm going to wait 40 years until your generation dies off, and then I'm going to take your people into the promised land. And so that's what he does. And in the midst of that, this is all in the book of Exodus, which is literally just a book titled Exodus, meaning the exit from Egypt. And he begins to work in Moses, and he begins to lead these people on a journey through a wilderness as he's going to care for them until the 40 years have passed, and then they're going to be able to go into the promised land. But in the middle of all of that, we see Moses, a man that didn't want to lead. A man that had no intention of ever being a leader. A man who, when he was born, was abandoned because they were killing all the Israelite kids. A man that when God shows up in a burning bush moment and he gets to have a one-on-one conversation with the God of the universe in some miraculous event, says no. Can I tap out? Can you send somebody else? I don't even care who it is. Like passive, excuse-making Moses is now leading millions of people. He's interacted with the king who dominates the world. And he finds himself over top of like 2 to 3 million people. And he's trying to figure out, how do I handle it? And here's the thing about Moses. We're going to take a look at a story and a situation that's going on with him because he hadn't really set up a society. They had come out of slavery. There was no real society rules that they knew to set up. And so God gives them like the law and he begins to establish these things. But what Moses does is he says, look, the people have issues. And they have problems that we didn't have when we were in slavery. Like, what do we do with our free time? We didn't have that issue when we were in slavery. We didn't have free time. What do we do with all of our possessions? How do I know where my property line is compared to my neighbor's property line? Well, in slavery, we didn't have property, so this didn't really matter. And Moses goes, I'll help settle those disputes. It's good-hearted, well-meaning. He says, I'm going to help. Bring them to me. I'll help settle them. I'm meant to be God's representative for this group of people. And that is who he was meant to be. And so he says, I'm going to help settle your guys' issues. But what he gets, as you can imagine, with 2 to 3 million people, are a lot of issues. And so what we find with Moses is that he spends like all day long listening to people complain. Some of you are like, this is my workplace. Some of you are like, I'm in a leadership position. I don't know how I got there. I didn't want to be there, but now I'm in it and I don't know what to do and I don't want to fail. Some of you are like, I'm in a leadership position that I applied for, that I worked towards, that I worked my butt off to get to, and I'm here, but now I got some questions and I'm trying to navigate some things. Some of you are realizing that the platform you've achieved is requiring more time than you thought it would. And you're trying to figure out, how do I navigate this thing? Not I'm upset about it, just how do I navigate it? How do I enjoy it? Some of you just come in like, I don't know if I lead anything. I feel like I'm the bottom rung, or maybe I just got laid off and I don't even have a rung to stand on. Maybe you're a high school student and go, I've never led anything. I've always ever done what my parents tell me to do. And I'd really encourage you, if you ever want to lead anything, learn to lead yourself. It's a thing that I think we don't understand in our society. I think it's a thing that as a 30-something that I really don't get. I have a lot of entitlement mentality that's like, if I want to lead, I should be able to lead. One of the things that we do here at Element, and really try to encourage our leaders to do with our volunteers, is that we want people to be competent first, and then gain confidence in what they're doing, and then be able to be creative. Because we had a guy day one that came to me, the first conversation I ever had with this guy, he said to me, I'm going to be your worship leader, starting on Sunday. And I was like, nope. That's just weird, man. Like, I don't even know you. I don't trust you. I don't know. I already have a worship leader. Like, that's not why I called you. I need like a vocalist, and you just told me I'm going to lead everything. And he was like arrogant about it. And eventually it didn't work out because he didn't want to be second chair. But like, there's a process there. We need you to show that you're competent, and then we can help you be confident, and then we can help you be creative. But there's some like high school students that aren't even competent in making their bed that tell me that you're going to lead a business one day. There's college students, there's 20-somethings in the room that I work with that you tell me, I'm going to lead major organizations. I'm going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I'm going to have a whole family. I'm going to provide for them. I am going to crush life. But you can't crush studying for 2 hours. Well, that's harsh. No, that's real. I'm going to be able to do amazing things. Manage your schedule. I'm going to be able to like have millions. Budget now with hundreds. Like, we got to learn some things. The reason we're doing this series about community and the value of a strong community and why we need to be rooted in community is because we want to be able to go big and be strong and stand tall. We don't want to go big, be strong, and fall over and collapse because we got to the top and we didn't know how to handle it. The Bible has nothing against success. In fact, it equips us for it. And that's what we're trying to talk about in this. But Moses is a guy. Moses is a guy who gets to the top, is leading a nation, never really wanted to, but now is struggling. He sends his wife and 2 kids away to go live with their father-in-law. And I don't know exactly why he does that. It could have been to protect them. It could have been because he's so busy. It could have been for a lot of reasons. But they're now with his father-in-law, and he gets a message from his father-in-law. His father-in-law's name is Jethro. Love it, right? He comes and he says, hey, let Moses know that I'm coming, with his wife and his kids. And so Moses goes out and he greets them, and they have a conversation, and they catch up. And Jethro is a priest in Midian, and he says to Moses, he says, man, it is amazing what God did in you and through you and around you in dealing with Egypt. And Moses says, yes, it is. And he invites him into his tent, and they have this whole conversation. I'm sure there's some drinks exchanged, and they just celebrate. Here's what God has been doing in the past couple years. It is wonderful. And he says, great. I'm excited for you. And Midian the next morning gets up. He says, I'm just going to hang out with you if you're cool with that. And I'll just kind of follow you around. He says, yeah, that's good. And so here's the experience. It says the next day, Moses took his seat to hear the people's disputes against each other. They waited before him from morning until evening, and when Moses' father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he asked, "What are you really accomplishing here? Why are you trying to do all this alone?" You guys can go to the next slide. Yeah. What are you really accomplishing here? Why are you trying to do all this alone while everyone stands around you from morning until evening? Basically, why are you doing this? Like, Moses, help me out. You are leading a nation of people, but all I've seen you do is sit in a chair and make judgments all day long. And the people haven't gone away. As big as the line was in the morning, it seems longer in the evening. At what point do you stop this? And Moses replied, well, the reason I do it is because the people come to me to get a ruling from God. And when a dispute arises, they come to me, and I'm the one who settles the case between the quarreling parties. I inform the people of God's decrees, and I give them his instructions. And Moses' father-in-law just responds this way: this is not good. I wonder if he's caring for Moses or for his grandkids. Like, your kids don't get to see you, man. I just got back with your family that you sent away to protect them while you were dealing with all the crap with Pharaoh, and I got that. But like, your boys are here and you're just worrying about other people's problems about property lines. It's not good. There's something lacking. You've achieved a bunch of stuff, but you've missed out on what's really important. And he says, you're going to wear yourself out, and the people too. This job is too heavy a burden for you to handle all by yourself. Listen to me. Let me give you a word of advice, and may God be with you. And then here's the word of advice that he gives them. He says, you should continue to be the people's representative before God, bringing their disputes to him. So basically, pray for them. Teach them God's decrees and give them his instructions. Show them how to conduct their lives. So you're still leading. You're still in charge. You're still going to help them. But then he says this, but select from all the people some capable, honest men who fear God and hate bribes. Appoint them as leaders over groups of 1,000, over groups of 100, over groups of 50, and over groups of 10. They should always be available to solve people's common disputes, but have them bring the major cases to you. Let the leaders decide the small matters themselves, and they'll help you carry the load, making the task easier for you. If you follow this advice, and if God commands you to do so, you'll be able to endure the pressures, and all these people will go home in peace. See, I think here's what Jethro is saying. I mean, we just read it, right? He's saying you need to delegate. But I think there's two reasons he wants him to delegate. I think it's for him. I think there's actually three. For him, for his people, and his family. He says, Moses, if you're going to be able to endure leading these people for the next several years, you need to learn to delegate, because you're going to kill yourself. You're going to burn out. Working this many hours and never having a break is not good. It's not healthy. You need to make a change. Maybe it's been good for a season, but that season is ending. Your family is back. Moses, this isn't good for your family. Your boys have been back for 2 days, and they haven't seen you at all because you've been listening to everybody else's problems. It's time to get somebody else involved. And then the third group of people is, it's better for the people, Moses, if you're not the only leader for them. If you equip some other people to be around them, it would be good for them. And it says Moses listened to his father-in-law's advice, and he followed his suggestions. He chose capable men from all over Israel and appointed them as leaders over the people. He put them in charge of groups of 1,000, 100, 50, and 10. These men were always available to solve common disputes among the people. They brought the major cases to Moses, but they took care of the smaller matters themselves. Here's why all this matters. We have a theme verse for this passage, and not for this passage. We have a theme verse for this series of Rooted, and it's out of Ecclesiastes, and it tells a story of a guy who's struggling. And I'm going to just read it real quick. It says that he observed another example of a guy who's struggling, something meaningless under the sun. He says, this is the case of a man who is all alone, without a child or a brother, who works hard to gain as much wealth as he can. And he asks himself, who am I working for? Why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It's all meaningless and depressing. Basically, I get to the top and there's nobody around me to enjoy it with, and this sucks. That's the thing the guy's dealing with. And then Solomon recaps it, and he says, two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. I feel like this right here is Moses and Jethro. It's Jethro's advice to Moses. Moses, if you're going to lead this thing all by yourself, you're going to struggle. You're going to fall. You're going to miss out. You're going to get to the top. You're going to be leading everything, and you're going to have nobody to share it with. It's not even going to be helpful. Two people are better off than one. They can help each other succeed. If one person falls, they can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. And the passage continues, and you can read the rest of Ecclesiastes 4, 7 through 12. But I'm going to skip ahead because I want to give you two things that you need to know about building community. Because I want to challenge you this morning to build community, and it's going to be work. And I want you to recognize that. So here's the first thing I want you to know about building community. It is going to be work. It's going to be tough. I don't know if you realize this, but like delegating is not an easy thing to do. There's a couple of reasons. One, because you have to trust other people, which sucks. I mean, how many people love group projects? One person. That means he's the guy who doesn't do the work. I mean, I love group projects. I never did anything in group projects. Actually, here's what I did in group projects. I got away with this because I'm a good speaker. And I just went, I'll present. And people were like, oh, thank God. And I'm like, you just give me the material like 10 minutes before class and I will present. And they're like, great. And I was like, awesome. I don't have to do anything. And then I just went up there and talked. And the teacher was like, that's great. And they felt like I contributed and I did nothing. I just did what was super easy for me. Not my suggestion, but just, hey, if you speak well, tell people you'll speak. Anyway, delegating is work. It takes time. You have to trust people. You've got to create culture around that. You've got to sit down with them. I want you to just think about Moses for a minute, right? Moses has a line of people from morning until night. And we're just going to assume that that's not all of the disputes because that would be realistic to assume, right? So that at night, there's some people and he kind of like hands out some numbers and like, you're number one. So in the morning, you're the one who's in the front of the line and you're ready to start and you're ready to go and you're going to bring your problems to me first. Okay, great. And that line just continues and continues and continues. Now here's what you need to realize. Delegating and finding men who can lead thousands and hundreds and 50s and 10s is either going to happen while that line gets longer or it's not. It's not that the people stop having issues. It's not like Moses calls hey, time out on your problems. You don't have any disputes for the next week so I can learn to delegate this thing. No, the line just keeps growing. But Moses has to set aside some of that time to say, I'm going to do something different. And he starts pulling in people and he goes, hey, you're trustworthy. You don't like bribes. You're somebody I can put in positions. I want you to lead some people and I'm going to train you of how to do it. Come sit with me tomorrow while we do this thing. Oh, I think you could lead some people. Come sit with me tomorrow while we do this thing. And his kind of like counsel begins to grow. But then that causes a problem too, because as his counsel would grow, that means there's more opinions. And he's got to hear, like, how would these people settle disputes? And would they do it well? Are they capable? Are they able to understand? Are they able to discern between who's right and who's wrong, who's lying and who's telling the truth? And he's got to, like, do that. That is work. See, here's the thing from this morning. A strong community makes us wiser, but a strong community is hard to build. I talk to so many people who are part of Element who are like, I lack a real community. One guy sent me a picture. It was a meme of this girl at a grocery store. And I don't know what the girl was actually looking for, but literally the grocery store rack that she's looking at is empty. There's nothing at all on the rack. Like there's not like a price tag. There is just nothing on the rack. And she's looking and she's like looking like this, like she's trying to like search for something. Like, is this the right thing that I'm looking at? And there's nothing there. And the meme just said, me when I'm trying to figure out what friend to call. And you guys go, oh, but that's somebody's real life. And I would, if I'm real, I don't just think it's one person in the room. I don't just think one guy at Element struggles to have a strong community that he can actually lean on, that can actually help him walk through life and know what to do. If I'm real, I could just start telling some of y'all stories about conversations that we have that just reflect things like I really struggle to have real community. Strong community is not easy. If you want it, if you want to build community, you need to understand that it's going to be work. It does not come naturally to anyone. So get past that. But so-and-so, I don't care. It doesn't come naturally to anyone. Being vulnerable and real and open and honest and receiving truth and receiving grace is not natural for us. We want to resist because we're inherently selfish. We want to be closed off because it's safer. So if you have those objections, I get it. Just understand that building community is going to be work. The second thing you need to understand about building community is this: it's going to be worth it. If you want to have a family one day, if you want to be around that family one day, if you want to have people that you share this thing with, if you want to be able to get to the top and actually sustain it, you're going to need community. I have a pastor who's a friend of mine, and I don't know why he does, well, I know why he does this, but it was weird to me when he first told me. He said, I look up about every 6 months pastors who have fallen and been fired. That's weird. And he's like, yeah, it's not to celebrate. I'm never happy about pastors having an affair or stealing from the church bank account or, just lying and giving up on things and just having no integrity. I don't celebrate that. I do it because I got to remember that if I don't stay healthy, if I don't have community, that eventually one day I'm going to wind up there. He's like, I do it just as a reminder to myself that I need to have a strong community so I don't go down that road. And I wonder, if there's some of us that go, hey, I don't know why community is necessarily going to be worth it. I don't get it. The best answer I have this morning is Ecclesiastes 4:7-12. It's going to be somebody that helps you succeed. It's going to be somebody that picks you up when you fall. It's going to be somebody that's there to share it when you get it. Because if you work on your own and you achieve everything, what Solomon says is that it's meaningless in the end. You got to the top and had nobody to share it with, and it's a waste of your time. But building community is going to be work, and it's going to be worth it. Here's what I want to challenge you with as we kind of begin to wrap this morning up, is that if you're going to build community, there's some questions you need to ask yourself. And I don't know if you're going to do it. I don't know if you view it as worth it. But I want to challenge you to ask these questions. The first one is this: building community, where are you lacking? You need to know, where are you lacking? In your leadership, in your life, what are you missing? Where are you struggling? What stresses you out the most? Is it finances? Maybe you need to join Financial Peace, a small group that we have, to start having conversations about finances so that you can actually get them in order. And while I'm on the topic of financial peace, this morning's a little bit sporadic. Don't stress about that. I want to celebrate a couple people. We got 4 people who are in financial peace who are in their young 20s, who don't have all kinds of jacked up financial situations. A couple of them do, a couple of them don't. But all 4 of them want to get finances right. I was talking last night with the people who lead financial peace, and here's what they said. If we had done that at 20, how much different our lives would be today. If we had done that at 25, what a different position we would be in. And here's the thing, finances stress everybody out. But to have 4 people who are a part of Element who have the maturity to say in their young 20s, I want to get this right. I want to actually experience peace. I don't want to be stressed out all the time when it comes to money. That just excites me. As a guy who's had all kinds of financial issues, because I've lacked all kinds of restraint, because I thought I could lead myself, and I really wasn't that good at it, it's just exciting for me. So if you're one of those people, be proud of yourself. Be excited about that. That just excites me that we have guys that are saying, hey, I want to get this right. But you got to figure out where you're lacking. Is it financially? Some of you in the room are financially set. There are people in this room that are making more money than you have any idea what to do with. And you've gone through some financial planning and you've got a financial advisor and you're paying them the right amount of money and they're taking care of you and you're good. Finances don't stress you out. But you go, I don't know. I don't have anybody to share this with. I don't have a date. I don't know the last time I had a date. I'm struggling to talk to women, or I'm struggling to talk to guys. I'm trying to navigate this. Maybe you need to find some other people in your life that you can hang out with. Maybe you need to get around some married people, because there is one thing this ring does. It says, I've done it. I always love when single people tell me I don't know anything because I haven't been single recently. I'm like, no. I already did it. Like, I accomplished it. Say what you want. You're still single. I'm not. Doesn't mean my formula is going to work for you. It just means I know some things maybe you don't. And so maybe if you go, I'm struggling to talk to some people. I'm struggling to have some conversations with the opposite sex. I'm struggling to navigate this. How do I do it? Maybe you need to get around some married people. Pick newlyweds if you want to. Pick some people with some real solid marriages. Best marriage advice I got when I was single was from a guy who had been married for like 30 years. And he said, if you don't know how to laugh at yourself, you can never be married. I mean, you can. Like, you can put a ring on. You can make some vows, but like happily married. You got to have the ability to laugh at yourself and laugh at one another and just have a good time with it. It's the best advice I've ever gotten from marriage. And it came from somebody who was nowhere close to being single. Hadn't been single since like the 80s. Solid. Get around some married people. Maybe you go, I'm lacking in a different area. Maybe you're leading a business. Maybe you want to be an entrepreneur in some way. Get around some people who are entrepreneurial. One of the best things that I do, I have pastors that I talk to, but I have other business leaders that I talk to. A side benefit of hanging out with somebody where I realized an area I was lacking is I want to be a better hunter and fisherman, like outdoors guy, because I enjoy that. I want my son to be an outdoors guy. I started hanging out with my cousin Bill. He's a district manager and part owner of 3 Jiffy Lubes. I didn't think that would matter at all. But it's been great because there's been times where I've been able to talk to him about leadership stuff, and he goes, yeah, when we had one store, here's what we did. And I'm like, oh, that's super solid because you've been leading a business now for years. And so some of the struggles that I'm running into, some of the things I'm butting up against, you've already dealt with. And you can advise me on them. And so you got to determine, where are you lacking? Which, if I'm real, means you got to ask a tough question of yourself and then really answer it. Because there's some of us in the room that hate this question. Because we know where we're lacking, but we just want to deny it. And so we go, nope, I'm done. I don't want to admit that I have real problems, so I'll just pretend that I don't. But genuinely, ask yourself the question, where are you lacking? Secondly, ask yourself this question, who can fill the void? Who can fill the void? Is there somebody that I know who's in a similar position? Is there somebody I know that I work with? Maybe it's an issue I'm dealing with at work and I'm trying to navigate some things and I need to talk to somebody else who's maybe a little bit ahead of me or maybe just kind of on my level and we can work through some things. Who can fill this void? Moms. Maybe it's some other moms. Not just your mom. Dads. Maybe it's some other dads who know what it is to go through stuff and have a work-life balance and provide for the family, but also spend time with the kids. I don't know who the right person is, but you got to ask the question, who can fill the void? And I would encourage you to make a list of people. And you can prioritize that list, and maybe there's 1 or 2 people who come to mind right away, and I'd encourage you to write down some more. Because those 1 or 2 people who come to mind right away may not have the availability that you need them to have. I'm not venting at all in what I'm about to say, but there are some people who, when that question comes up and they think, who can fill this void in my life? Their answer is their pastor. But the reality is, I don't always have capacity. Jesus had capacity for 12. I'm not better than Jesus. I'm not even as good as Jesus. There's 45 people in the room. You can do the math, but that means 1/4 of you get my attention. 1/4 of you would get Jesus' attention. We got to recognize some things. It's not because I don't want to be available, but I'm not always able to fill the void. I have a family. I got a 16-month-old. I got one on the way. I have friends that I hang out with and people that I spend time with. I have self-care that I need to do. I have a wife at home that I'm darn sure going to take care of. Because I got to do that. I want to do that. I want to enjoy it with her. But that means I'm not always available for everybody. And here's why I'm saying all this. It's not about me. Let me be real clear. It's about you. You pick some people and you go, who can fill the void? The best person that can fill the void for me is Gary Vee. The problem, he's got 400 million followers online and he's never going to be available to you. So pick somebody else. I have somebody who can fill the void. It's my owner of my business at work. Great. You've been there for 2 weeks. He probably isn't going to have a conversation with you tomorrow. The person who's going to fill the void for me is somebody who's super busy and amazing. Great. Maybe they have time. Maybe they don't. Expand your list. I thought the people who were going to fill the void for me were pastors who I looked up to. And I have a few pastors that I'm in community with that I can look up to. But I also have an owner of a Jiffy Lube that speaks wisdom into my life. I also have people that I'm able to lean into other places. Let me tell you one person that cannot fill the void. A book. A podcast. Something else. Those things will make you smarter, but they won't make you wiser. There is a difference. You can gain smart by reading, by listening to a podcast, by engaging with a video, by doing something like that. And all of those things are well worth your time. You should plan them into your schedule and do them often. I do it too. They help me be smarter. They don't help me be wiser. Getting around people who are in similar positions, a little bit ahead of me, makes me wiser. And here's why. Because when I spend time with them and I hear about their pitfalls, I can avoid them on my own. When I share my life experience with them and when I hear their life experience, it helps me from experiencing their struggles. It's worth it. It's more personal. It's more vulnerable. It's more real. But I would say this, it's also more beneficial. So yes, gain knowledge, but figure out how to gain wisdom. And that comes through relationships and through community. So where are you lacking? Who can fill the void? And then the third question is this: how can you build a relationship? The question of the day this morning, out on the board, was how many hours a week do you spend on your phone? I did this morning and I hate it. My screen time is like through the roof. I think mine was 5 hours and 42 minutes a day. It might have been 6 hours and 42 minutes. I know it was 42 minutes, but that's the insignificant number there. 6 to 7 hours a day I spent on my phone. There were some days where it was like through the roof, and I look at like what I was doing, and it wasn't like messaging and talking and doing stuff. It was like golf battle, Facebook. Like it wasn't anything meaningful. Hours of my week, tens of hours of my week wasted playing something. And I'm lacking. And I'm struggling. And I have tension. But it's easier to play a game than it is to do the work to build community. It's easier to send a text message than it is to actually pick up the phone and say, hey, when can we hang out? Can we grab a beer? Can we grab a coffee? Can we sit down together? Got a text message this week from a good friend of mine who I went to man camp with. And man camp was, a month and a half ago now. And he said, man, I've been falling back into some things that I left behind at man camp. And now I'm picking them back up, and my cynicism and my doubts and my frustration, all that's kind of coming back. I just feel like I need to be around some guys who were there who shared the experience. And my text back was, we need to plan a time for all the guys from man camp just to get together, to have a conversation, to catch up. Because we took a step towards community 6 weeks ago, that doesn't mean we have strong community today. It's an ongoing process. For most of us, it's easier just to send a text and go, yeah, pray for me in that. it's harder to get together and actually pray for one another. It's easier to post a message on Facebook for the world to read, but we don't actually engage with a person who can legitimately help us. And so I want to challenge you with the question of how can you build the relationship? I don't know. Maybe it needs to start with a Facebook message, but then it needs to move deeper than that. Maybe it's you need to save money from yourself going out to eat so you can buy somebody else coffee so you can actually value their time and get something from them. Maybe it's you need to clear some space in your calendar so you can engage with people. Because golf battle's cool, but it's not making life better. I don't know what the solution is for you and how you can build the relationship. Here's what I've had to do. I've had to set aside time, and I've had to set aside dollars. That's it. I block out time in my calendar to be developing relationships with people that I know that are going to help me, that are going to make my community better, that are going to ultimately make me wiser. And I've set aside dollars to thank those people. Whether it's I buy their coffee or I buy their lunch or I send them a thank you card every now and then with a $25 gift card to Chipotle because they won't let me buy them lunch. I've learned that if I would set aside time and I set aside dollars, that it leads to me valuing a strong community and I actually put in the work to do it. For some of you, it may be something different. Here's what I know. In Moses' story, Moses' life got better when he built a better community. He went from a guy who had to do everything, who had no time for anyone, to somebody who was able to experience life and actually enjoy it while still accomplishing great things. He still was the leader of the nation. He still was at the top of his organization. But he had people around him that he could share it with. And it enriched his life and made it better. And that's what we're going to be talking about next week. So I want you to come back as we talk about how building a strong community gives us somebody to share it with and why that's best for us. Let me pray for you. God, I thank you for who you are. Lord, I pray that somehow, some way, in what I said, you sparked something in us that maybe we've been avoiding a community for a long time. We know it would be better. We know it might be best, but signing up for a small group's uncomfortable because I'd have to be real, or getting around people and having a one-on-one conversation's awkward because they're going to ask me real questions that I can't avoid, or whatever that kind of thing is that we just push off because it seems like more work than it might be worth. God, I just pray that this morning you would challenge us to at least ask ourselves these few questions. Where are we lacking? Who can help us? And how can we build that relationship? God, help us to be men and women that say, hey, I'm going to take the first step. I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to work towards this because I know building a community that's strong is going to make my life better and it's going to make me wiser. And so, God, I pray that you would help us to do that. God, give us the strength to do it even when it doesn't work out the way we think it would. Give us the endurance to stick with it when it's tough. God, I pray that just this morning you'd encourage us. It's in your name I pray. Amen. So one of the things we do here at Element as we try and do communion on a regular basis, it just reminds us that Jesus steps into our mess. We feel like we're lacking, and we are, because we were called to be perfect and we're not. And so Jesus says, I'll come and I'll be the sacrifice and I'll fill the void and I'll take care of the problem. And he does that. And so you have a stack of 2 cups that's coming down your row. You can grab those 2 cups. One of them has some juice. One of them has a cracker. Just a reminder of the body and blood of Christ that he shed for us so that we could have hope, so that we can fill the void, so that our eternity isn't lacking. And we don't have to spend life that way. And so you can take that and just use it as a tool to remember what God did for you. And the band's going to lead us in a couple songs as we close.